Hi, my name is Melissa. Welcome back to my channel. When I first started hearing about people and their spirit guides, I thought either number one, they were delusional, or number two, they were tired of the hierarchical approach to religion, and so they kind of developed their own little, spiritual guide team, God, whatever. But that changed when I started writing. I've known my guides my entire life. I just never knew they were my guides. When I was a little girl, we went to church. And in Sunday school, I thought that all the stuff that I was hearing inside my head, and it's not like I hear it with my ears, it's just I know stuff. But I thought all of that stuff, those conversations that were happening inside my head, I thought it was God. I must have said something because I quickly learned that no, that was not God. You are not that special. But we moved a lot as a family, and every time we would move to these new locations, it was like this little team I had inside me that would help me as I struggled to, fit in at school with the popular kids, which I never did, making friends outside of school as well. And then I used to try to work with them like wishing things, right? I started developing this relationship with them like, oh, they're the wish granters of my life. All I have to do is wish or hope for something, like all the garages on this street would be clean and organized, and that I would be the pinnacle of the popular group, that somehow a miracle would happen. But I quickly learned that they did not give me advice above my pay grade. And that, like everyone else in life, I was going to have to eat my Wheaties. I was going to have to go through humiliation, embarrassment, guilt, shame, fear, all those other emotions. My spiritual guide team, that I didn't know then, but that was at work, was not here to save me from life. So at 16, I got a job and I got a driver's license. Game changer in my search for understanding how the metaphysical world works. Every weekend, I would go on a pilgrimage with my paycheck down to the Peachtree Battle Shopping Center in Atlanta. And I would go into Oxford Books. It had double doors. You would walk in, and it smelled of books and coffee, because they had a coffee shop there. 2 stories of books on every topic you could ever think of in the world. And they had vast sections dedicated to these obscure topics. For me, it was like the metaphysical section was so big, there was no embarrassment walking back there. And I would hang out for hours, spend my entire paycheck. And I read a lot of books, or got a lot of books, on understanding, your clairvoyant skills. And they talked a lot back then about clairaudience and clairvoyance. But that wasn't mine, right? And so I'd spend my time trying to develop those skills and work with those, but those weren't mine. So I turned to astrology, which has always been my passion since I was a young girl. My mother had a book on astrology, and I don't think she ever read it, but I did at a very young age, and totally hooked. It was definitely my language. But what those books didn't answer is where the source of my power was. And I felt so alone because I had dreams in my life and I didn't know how to achieve them. And I was hoping for someone to be in my corner, right? And I looked to those books to do that. But those books didn't answer that question of what I wanted to do with my life, what purpose I had for being born. I knew I didn't want to be a slave to fate. And I didn't want to wing it all at the whims of consciousness. And since my guides didn't use visions or voices, I was on my own. After high school, I enrolled in a community college into psychology and marketing, areas where I thought I had some interest. And then I moved out, I think at the same time. I was on my own. I was calling the shots in my life. I didn't think my guides were there, but they were. In 1987, I was living on my own one-bedroom apartment, outskirts of Atlanta, beautiful wooded area. I loved this apartment. A knock came on the door on one Saturday afternoon. So I go to answer and have my hand on the door, and I'm answering through the door. I ask who it is, and it's this guy who wants to use my phone. And I asked him why, and his friend apparently had just moved in and they didn't have phone service. There's something about it, and I was like, okay, hold on a minute. And I think I was gonna like unlock the door, right? It's like, don't make mountains out of molehills, Melissa. You don't need to worry about this guy. The apartment is full of people. If anything happened, they would hear you. And he's getting kind of insistent at this point. He's like, hey, are you there? Are you there? I said, yeah. And I looked through the peephole. Nice enough looking guy, right? Be nice, Melissa, just be nice, My age, maybe a little bit older. I could not unlock that door. It was just a clear knowing. And I told him, no, you can't use my phone. And he got mad. 2 weeks later, they used to give out these little newspapers, right? For the town I was living in. And I read an article that let me know why I didn't let that man in my house. I wasn't delusional. I wasn't making mountains out of molehills. Something was guiding me in that situation. Same year, I'm working at this large telecommunications company. It was my first time working the 3 to 11 shift because I usually worked the midnight shift so I could go to school and study and all that stuff, because that's what I was doing. I was just putting myself through school. I was focused on studying. I was going to go open some art gallery in New York or work with some, large marketing firm. Didn't know. We're at this job, and we used to go out at night after work. There were different groups of people who would go out. The people who loaded tapes a lot, which is me, because I was not a techie person. I didn't work up in consoles where the techie people worked. We would go out for drinks at night. And the techie people, the people up in consoles, they would go out for drinks at night. And so we would maybe go to the same bar, right? But we didn't really hang out together. There was this gentleman named Matt. He was older than me, probably in his 50s at the time. Soft, gentle soul, just so beautiful, and probably too gentle for this earth. People would make fun of him. That's a shame. He's a beautiful man. Word came that his father had died. So my friends and I went out to work, to talk about what we could do for Matt. And this other team of people who worked up in consoles also went out that night too. There are these two guys from this team who used to irritate me. One was this real kind of pompous guy, and he had these muscles and this shirt that stretched across his muscles and stuff like that. I am not one of those women that likes the muscly dudes, right? And then this guy had this really irritating friend, tall and lanky, long hair. Sorry, I just thought he was the biggest jerk. I thought both of them were jerks. For some reason, they come over to our table that night and they sit and they talk. And this one guy, the muscly guy, starts talking to me. And I'm like, total distraction. I'm not paying any attention to him. We start going out to bars, and he separates from his team, and he starts coming over and started talking to me. I swear to God, 6 weeks later, the man is living with me. 37 years later, we now have 2 kids together. And he's my husband. And I adore him. He's not as poofy anymore. Clearly, he wasn't a distraction. Fast forward a few years. I was very focused on having a career that I could depend on myself, so I could have my own house, have my own income, and be self-supportive, to never be dependent on anyone. I didn't want what society was selling as a role for women, to get married, to have kids, to join clubs and stuff like that, tennis clubs. That was not me. I wanted to have a career. I didn't want to do what my mother wanted me to do, which was to be a dentist. I had no interest in that at all. And so I searched in these books to try to find what I could do. I wasn't keen on a real corporate career because I knew about the plexiglass ceiling, right? So I wasn't a climber, but I wanted to understand what was unique about me that I could do. So I read What Color Is Your Parachute? and it offered just the same old standard answers as to what options you could choose from to work in the corporate world. Those weren't mine. So what did I end up doing? I got married, I had kids, and I left my corporate job after I had my kids. But finding my purpose reared its head again after my kids got into school. I started reading books again about finding my North Star. I forget who that was written by, but it was a very good book. I also read Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. Highly recommend that book. And I got back into journaling. And I would journal not just the 3 pages. I would journal 20, 30 pages sometimes. And in those pages would be these nudges, these ideas to start writing. A story was forming in my head about past lives, about these characters. But I wrote in my novel, as I've mentioned before. I would never write a novel. I'm not qualified. I can't do that. But at the time I was interested in children, of course, and nutrition. So I thought I'll go back to school and I'll study nutrition. And I'll figure out how to start up a website and how to start a blog, and I'll riff off of that. But in 2023, in September it was, and I think like 1:30 or 2:30 in the morning, I was woken. And it was like, I was not tired at all. I just bolted right out of bed and I went downstairs. And all of these thoughts that I had been pushing aside, and about these characters and about this story and stuff, poured out of me onto my Mac. And I started writing this story. 6:30 in the morning came so quickly. And before I knew it, I had to get the kids off to school. I had totally lost track of time. But I could no longer push away in this ocean of ideas, these thoughts. You know those liners that they have in the ocean that keep the trash away from you? It's like all that stuff just came at me and just flooded me. All these ideas, and it started going off in different directions. I was totally obsessed. No one was surprised more than me that I could have such an uneducated passion. But I did. I started researching things. I would get ideas about Google this, Google that. I had to learn how to become a writer. How do you write a novel? How is a novel structured? I had no idea. I had never studied this stuff in school. I had always gotten feedback on my writing and in my papers that they were very good. Many of them were read aloud, but I had never wanted to pursue being a writer. I think this is also probably an appropriate time to mention that I never really asked my guides for things. I never asked questions. I always waited for them to give me something, and then I'd wrestle with it. The story that I thought I was going to tell quickly changed and expanded into like 18 characters and stuff I was not equipped to handle. But this channel had opened that I could no longer close. I sent that first draft off in 2015 to be edited. It was more probably out of proof to myself that I could do it. And I think for the guides, from their perspective, it was probably like, look, let her finish the first novel, get that out there, because we need her to be free of that novel so we can guide her on writing what this novel is really going to be about. Because in that time, when the novel went to the editor, I started getting the downloads about the past lives that were led. I started getting other downloads about structure and things like that I needed, that I was so busy. I mean, I don't think they could get in my head from 2013 to 2015. It was just hard because I was just so excited. But this downtime of having that first novel done, or so I thought, was their time to come in and really shape what it was going to look like, this whole journey, because it morphed into 7 to 9 novels. This time, the main characters, Catherine Winslow and James Layton, I was learning about their past lives in Victorian England. So they were giving me, my guides were giving me all these different links about getting into the corn laws and understanding what it was like in not Cornwall, the Cotswolds, the Cotswolds. So I had to learn about sheep farming and trading and all these different things, right, to be able to write the novel. I didn't write the 1850s novel then, but I had to understand all of that stuff to structure the underlying story. At the same time, the guides were very insistent on starting a website and getting a website up. So I had to learn how to do that. They also wanted me to start in social media, doing things like this. Of course, I didn't listen until recently, but they were on me about it way back when. And so I had to reach out to people, right? And in the publishing industry, they will tell you there are a lot of people who, can be trusted, and there are some that can't, right? So you have to find people. And this is a whole new world for me, right? So I relied on my guides. As I was finding different people and they were being put on my path, my guides were giving me resources to use, people, contacts, and things like that. Some people were very helpful. Other people were not. And they just, it just didn't turn out well. What we thought we were getting did not meet the brief. And those were some really hard lessons between discerning what a knowing is and wishing something to be divinely sent. I'm much clearer on that line now. And it was also a clear lesson that the mind's navigation system is not the same as the soul's navigation. And I'm sure you all know that, but I think it was those circumstances because they hurt. It wasn't just the loss of money, it was how friendships were affected and things like that, and decisions that I had to make. It was just really difficult. The brain and the spirit, they use different languages. It's kind of like, you had the cell towers and the routers, right? One is analog, looks like this. Another is satellite, 5G, right? Very direct, just works very differently. And I might send out a request to get to Boise, right? But something happens along the switches and the routers and things like that, and I end up in Poughkeepsie. That, to me, is kind of what it's like sometimes talking to my spirit guides. So I thought a lot about this dynamic of how can I make sure that the routers and the switches, that I get to the destination that I want to get to. How do I understand how I'm hearing these voices inside my head, these knowings? How do I understand my claircognizance and how it works so my logic doesn't get in the way? And mind you, at this time, I think it's like 2017, I'm working on the second version of the novel that incorporates more of the past life stuff, right? I'm vacuuming or something like this. Often my spirit guides will send me on a physical quest so they can have the time to get in, because I tend to think a lot of claircognizant people do. Hard to shut down the head. But I'm vacuuming, and then these words come to my head, 2 at a time. Drop the vacuum cleaner, right? Run to my office, open up the armoire door, get my pen and write on the whiteboard these 6 words.
Distraction, or divine, is this sudden, impulsive invitation to go paint a bedroom? Or maybe to go for a walk a distraction because I'm apprehensive about facing some task that I'm not equipped for? Or is it by chance divine guidance getting me outside to clear my head? Possibly so I can get some new ideas. Elusive or illustrative? Is the thought deceptive in nature to avoid change, or is it illustrating something I need to consider? Take archangels, for example. Never been interested, but all of a sudden it's coming at me through multiple mediums. Is there something there for me? Or maybe you're buying your first house, your dream house you saved for years, but articles on flooding, songs about floods of tears, feeds in your social media get to you. And so you take a look at the history of the house only to discover it's had flooding issues in the past. This leads to the next set of words. Delusion or illusion? Wishful thinking versus taking the hint. A hint is much softer than being illustrative, and your spirit guides will expect you to have great listening skills to understand that difference. Back to the house analogy, wishful thinking is that the people would have done the right thing and hired professionals to mitigate the risk of flooding. Taking the hint would be digging deeper, possibly to find that the company that did the repair work was sued and is now out of business for shoddy work.
I wasn't sure what to do with these 6 words, but I knew they arrived for a reason because this is how my guides talk to me. As I was writing the novel, these words were a guidepost that I was using, but I was so fixed on applying them to the novel that I didn't really get what they were doing with the 6 words. So at the end of the second draft, I figured out how to fit those 6 words in. So I went back and wrote from the beginning again, that novel, all the while ignoring this stream of thought that they were giving me that would come back to bite me in 2023. Again, I was so focused on getting the novel out there because people had stopped asking how I was doing on the novel. And I knew what they were thinking. I wanted them to see. I'll just be honest, it's humiliating if you fail at something, right? I didn't want to fail at writing this novel. I'm 10 years into writing this novel series. I'm still on the first novel because I did not pay attention to what they were sharing with me, what they were suggesting, what they were alluding to, and they were illustrative as well, back when I was writing that third draft of the novel. Because free will is a divine law. It's one of the universal 9 rules that I'll be talking about in the future novels that I'm writing. Your guides will never run over your free will. They will work as hard as they can, like at that door, to have me not unlock that door, but I had free will. I could go against it. So I sent that third draft off to be edited. I'm sure my guides were throwing up their arms, just totally frustrated with me. My guides have more faith in me than I do myself. What they were suggesting, what I had heard in my head, was so overwhelming for me. I didn't know how to write the novel in a different voice. I was fixed on thinking it had to be in the first person. But it couldn't be in the first person and talk about past lives because the novel story is that both Catherine and James don't understand how their past lives are playing into the present life, how with different sets of rules in this lifetime, they are reworking their consciousness and the love that they have for each other. But after I sent that draft in, because of the frustration my guides likely felt with me, it became important for me to find out what my spirit guides looked like. So one day, I sat down, went into meditation, and I said, tell me what you look like, and I'd like you now to meet my spirit guides.
Doc is like an ancient redwood tree, compassionate wisdom built from surviving thousands of years. When life's storms roll in, it's Doc that helps me piece it all together and find faith in myself. Doc is my lead guide. Tulips pushes visions and bold ideas into my stubborn nature. It goes deep to the root of all my fears and insecurities, creating tidal waves of emotion so I can release the obsolete and conceive more. Whiz is like a live wire dropping into a pool of thoughts. Whiz breaks through my cognitive barriers and connects those random thoughts and events to form new ideas using things like music, synchronicity, nature, animals, whatever it takes.
You don't have to have a visual for your guides. They'll come to you through music, through other people, through circumstances, synchronicity, repeated numbers, things like that. They'll come to you. And speaking of, have you heard? Taylor Swift has a new album out. She has a song in it called Prophecy, about the desperate nature that we feel to sometimes connect to the divine. But we're not all called to know our spiritual guides, and that's okay. I was told it's a bunch of hocus pocus, right? A lot of this metaphysical stuff that I subscribe to, people close to me and my family did not subscribe to. I really had to go out on my own on it, right? And believe in myself and believe in my own thoughts.
To me, the 6 words reflect the war that humanity faces, that it experiences between logic and the psychic world, that spiritual world we were once connected to. It's not the heart and the mind, as it's often said, though our spirit guides do use both logic and emotion to work with us. The 6 words here offer a scale, a way to discern and understand the language our spirit guides use to communicate with us. The answers we hear are only as good as the questions we're willing to ask. This list of words, where logic is on the left and sensing is on the right, can be used to discern those answers. And if our questions were rooted in fear and a search for control, or if it's our spirit guides inviting us to sense something different, like our rules or our self-imposed limits, and the unconscious material that we have, that our logic would rather dismiss. Our birth chart isn't a prophecy, and it's the same with your spirit guides' answers to your questions. There are a range of possibilities, all to get to the same destination, but the details will differ. Birth chart, like the 6 words, helps us see behind our desires, both spoken and unspoken, and the unconscious fears that we're dealing with on this new and unpredictable journey to experience our power in the mundane, in this physical world, and to connect with the spirit world, to witness how we are all the same and loosen those ties of judgment and fear that constrict us in humanity.
Thank you so much if you have watched this. These are important things for me to say and to put out there. And I don't understand this journey, and it frustrates me a lot. I'm going to be back in a couple of weeks, hopefully with the astrology Dick and Jane approach, because astrology is a tool you can use for yourself. You don't have to become an astrologer, but it can give you insights in yourself if you understand how the language works. It's not that complicated, but it's a deep study if you want it to be. But there are simple tools you can use that can help you understand the hidden rules that are operating underneath you. I am so excited to get back into writing my novel, and I wonder when I'm going to do it, because this YouTube stuff, it's a lot. And I'm not writing while I'm doing this, so I'm a little frustrated. That's life, listening to your spirit guides and not listening to your logic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon, and I hope you have an absolutely awesome week.